Hello. It has been a very long time since I've been here on YouTube, and I'm excited to create some content for you on here. If you've been following me on Instagram, you're probably well aware of what's behind me here. So I wanted to take this opportunity now that we're getting into some warmer weather to share a little bit about my micro homestead here in our suburban community. I want to remind you that it is absolutely possible for you to grow your own food and be more self-sufficient even in an urban and suburban environment. I'll show you a little bit about how I did that and where we started, as well as maybe take you through maybe some future plans that we have for this micro homestead behind me. Now, I do apologize in advance. We live in a kind of windy area, and there are some construction things going on in the background with some of our neighbors. You're probably going to hear the helicopter above and maybe some honking of some cars, and that's really just to illustrate the fact that we are in a suburban environment. So you may not get the quiet country background that you're used to in some of these channels on YouTube, but this is real life for us. All right, so I wanted to show a little bit about the space itself. So if you back up a little bit, you'll see this is the side yard of our house. And so this altogether down this way is about 32 feet and across is about 20. So we really tried to maximize the space on the side of the house. It's on the west side of our home, so it does get a lot of really good sun after, I would say, about 11 o'clock. It starts to get really sunny. That is both a blessing, but also something we want to be aware of because it gets really, really warm out here in California. I'm talking about 110 plus on multiple days. So summertime is a little bit tricky. Now, when I started to envision what I wanted this garden to look like, I knew we wanted raised beds for this garden project. And that's because the soil out here is really terrible. It's clay, it's really, really dense. You really don't get a lot that really thrives in this type of soil, and I wanted the opportunity to control the type of soil that was going into my garden. So raised beds was the way to go, and I knew as far as raised beds go, I wanted something that was sturdy, but I wouldn't have to keep up with as the years went on, because again, we get crazy swings of weather out here. Some days it's pouring and it's frosty and it's very cold and wet, and some days it's blistering heat, and sometimes our weather can't quite make up its mind. So I wanted some beds that I knew would withstand the climate we were in, that was relatively low cost. And when we were building out our garden beds in 2021, lumber was still at an all-time high for us out here in this region. So I had pivoted and started to consider metal beds. So let me tell you a little bit about these beds, because I have been talking about them, raving about them on Instagram and other platforms for some time since I found them. So these beds here, they are metal. I wouldn't say it's the thickest of metal. Some of the competitor brand raised beds are quite thick and sturdy. It does also make them heavy for shipping. So if you are purchasing metal beds, that's just something to keep in mind as far as shipping and getting it to you. Now, these beds are actually 6 feet by 3 feet, 2 feet tall. And the reason I really was adamant about getting a tall raised bed is because I had tried to build beds before with lumber, and I realized as I was growing more and more things, especially my root vegetables, that I had really no space. It wasn't deep enough. The beds were so shallow that a lot really didn't thrive. So I knew right out of the gate I wanted some really tall. 2 feet tall seemed to fit the bill, but I really wanted tall beds so that I would have a lot more opportunity for the roots to grow deeper and really not be limited by the shallowness of the beds that I tried to use. So these beds are powder coated steel. And again, I have really clearly loved them because I bought 6 of them. Even after I tried one bed, I already knew I'm a fan. So these themselves are quite sturdy once assembled. If you're assembling them, you might feel like they're a little flimsy, but I promise you, once you have all the screws in and the stability bar, which is actually buried under here, it'll feel a lot more sturdy. So these beds are rectangular in shape. I wasn't kidding about the helicopter noise, but these beds are rectangular in shape, which I really loved. I wanted to make sure as I was planning out where these beds would sit, that I at least kept 2 feet in between each bed so that I could still come through here with a wheelbarrow for just maintenance, or if I wanted to do some major pruning and weeding, I would have the ability to bring a wheelbarrow down here. So that was actually good planning, because the last season when I decided to rip a bunch of these plants out because they had died and I wanted to replace what was planted there, I had a place to put all of my stuff in a pile. So because it's so hot out here, I often get asked if these metal beds retain a lot of heat, which could be really not great for your plants. And what I have found that even on our hottest days in direct sunlight, now the area right here that's kind of closer to the rim, that may get a little bit warm, but for the most part, when I had the opportunity to kind of test how warm the soil was on our hottest days, the center area of the garden beds really wasn't affected. And what was probably more of a risk for my plants was just sheer exposure to the sun on those hottest days. And so that's probably why, because it gets so hot out here, you've seen these in some of my videos and in this one. These are 12-foot long beams that we buried 18 inches down and concrete the base just for sturdiness, because again, it gets windy. But we've actually added, on the very top facing the house, we had attached these eye hooks so that we could install and use sunshade during our hottest days and when we had direct sunlight. So on the days that we want to use the eye hook, we can actually attach one side to these buried posts, and it's long enough and tall enough that it goes way above all of the garden, even on top of this trellis. But let me show you how we attached it. Hopefully you guys can see it, but under this piece of the roof, we had installed a D-ring so that we could clip the other side of the sunshade right to the house. We didn't have to install a post on this side. Now this winter, I will say, has been pretty brutal. We've had back-to-back storms, some major flooding, and I'm actually quite impressed that we have this much still growing, because at one point I really thought my winter garden was done for. But let me take you around and show you what is still growing and what we have plans for. So we got some baby Swiss chard, a whole bunch of kale, and I'm so proud, guys, because this kale, there's 2 varieties in here. I grew this from seed. I have not always had the best luck growing from seed. I have finally found a brand that really has come through for me. And again, I'm so proud. So on this half of the bed, I had bought some toy choy. And actually what's insane is I had already harvested all the toy choy, but I kept the base. And so what you see here is growing new is really just it keeps going, it keeps growing. I am letting one completely go to seed. I had 2, but the wind really just knocked one down. That's why you see that empty space there. But this is toy choy. I really, really did enjoy this variety, and I hope to grow more once I harvest the seeds. This bed here I had dedicated to cauliflower and broccoli, so I chose this cheddar cauliflower. I really love the color. This one was so fun, and my daughter really likes seeing some pop of yellow in the garden. Some days it's a little bit more orange than it is yellow, but it's been fun nonetheless. I'm excited to try that. In the middle here, I was growing arugula. It's kind of taken a life of its own. I will say though, my chickens love this treat. So every morning when I'm feeding them, I take some of what's on here, feed that to them, and it's a nice way for them to get some greens in, and they end up fighting over it anyways. And on this side of the same bed, we are growing broccoli. This is from seed. This is my first time attempting to grow broccoli from seed. In previous years and grow seasons, I had purchased the young plants from our local nursery. So this one's new for me. Again, we've had some pretty insane weather this winter, so I'm kind of just seeing how it goes. Now, I had told myself that I would dedicate a whole bed to lettuce, and I did well for the first part of it, but the succession planting didn't really work out. So this side was actually dedicated to lettuce. I had 2 or 3 different varieties of lettuce that I grew, but I really, really enjoyed this. We were eating from it all the time, but this is one of the reasons why it's so important to have succession planting, because one frost really started to wipe out this crop. So there's a lot of places where it's not really doing too well. Some places with the heat that we're having now, it's starting to get taller and bolt. So just know, if you are going to be doing succession planting, it's so important that you stay on top of the scheduling, because this should have had a bed full of lettuce that was kind of on its way out and new plants. I get a ton of questions anytime I post about this trellis, and I have to tell you, it is the easiest build. It's just a bunch of 2x2s, some staples, some coated fence wire, and some nails. That's all it is. Oh yeah, and some paint, and it needs a little bit more of paint. But it's secured into the garden beds by metal posts that are also painted. And again, you can customize this build to be however tall or wide you need for your garden. All right, we're back. I had to take a little bit of a break in between footage for this video. We ran out of battery and out of time the original day, and then a storm rolled in the very next day. We are in between storms right now, so I'm gonna try to maximize this time. But let's get back to it. All right, let me tell you about one of my most favorite projects to date along our preparedness journey. Behind me is our chicken coop and our chicken run. We added chickens to our micro homestead earlier in the year. And what started as a, I'd like to have chickens in our micro homestead, quickly, and I mean quickly, snowballed into me diving into plans, looking at features that I wanted to include as we decided to incorporate chickens into our micro homestead. I had started looking at ready-made coops and chicken runs. They were far too big. We don't have a lot of space in our backyard to work with already, and so we realized we had to start building out what we wanted this to look like. So let me show you a little bit about what we incorporated. Now we're still working on improving what we have, but when we planned out the chicken coop, we knew right away we wanted this off the ground. This area actually slopes downward towards the fence, and so we were already working with an uneven base. Building our chicken coop off the ground really allowed for us to fix the slope and make sure that it was stable and balanced, but it also gave us an opportunity to make it hip height for easy cleaning. Having this off the ground also gave us the opportunity to store feed and pine shavings under the coop, and that was a major bonus. So the coop itself actually has a rectangular base. It's 5 feet. You can hear my girls going. It's 5 feet by 4. I reserved a foot of that for the built-in nesting boxes. So the coop itself is actually 4 by 4. It does have a slanted roof that slants back. At its highest point, it's 4.5 feet. At its lowest point in the roof, it's 4 feet tall. So it does have a very, medium slope, and that's been really helpful in where it's oriented with how we usually get our rain. So everything in there stays dry, which has been critical because again, we've had some wacky weather and some heavy rainfall, so that's really nice. Now, it gets so hot out here for multiple days in the summer. So we knew when we were planning this out that we would need to build either multiple windows or larger windows to really help with ventilation and to keep things from getting too moist in there. We wanted something to help dry it out, create a draft. Right now they're covered up with plastic sheeting just to make sure we keep a lot of the moisture and the rain and the wind out because we are in winter. But we have one large window right across on the front here and actually one in the back as well to create a nice breeze inside. Now this coop is still fairly new to us and we know we want to improve this build here to actually have a much better fitting shutter in the winter and when the elements are not favorable. Right now it's covered with plastic sheeting on both sides just to help keep a lot of that moisture out. It's working well, but we know long term we want to make a better fix for this. So on the reverse side, you see I also have that covered up with our plastic covering. I've also included, you can hear my girls, sorry. You can also see that I've included a solar panel. That's powering the camera that we have installed inside. It's still close enough to our home to get our Wi-Fi signal. So if I want to check on the girls and not have to go all the way outside to do that, I can tap into the camera footage. Now, we went for a very simple and straightforward solution for our chicken run. This is actually a repurposed dog kennel. It is 8 by 4 and 6 feet tall at its highest peak, and it is serving us really well. Now, we don't have a lot of natural predators out here, mostly cats. Sometimes we'll see a raccoon, but for the most part, the chicken run as a dog kennel has been working really well for us. At night, the girls do go into the coop. There is an automatic metal door that closes behind them when it gets dark. So at night, actually, they're in the chicken coop, they're safe, they're secure, they're off the ground, and they're nice and cozy. Now, this side of the garden for us is showing the most promise for expansion. We realized when we measured it out, we actually had space for 2 more of these beds while still giving us a good walkway to the chickens and around the other beds. So we've ordered 2 more. We had left this space open. We weren't quite sure originally what we wanted to do, but now that we've had a chance to use these beds and try out the space, we've decided to add 2 more of the same beds. Woo, it is sunny, but as we build out this space here for the 2 additional garden beds, it's just going to give me so much more opportunity to grow more, to see what works in our area. I'm in zone 9B, so it's a very generous grow season, lots of sun, but that's something I'll have to take into consideration because these areas here don't have the same shade as the other 6 beds. So we may need to get creative with what our solutions are, or really think about what we want to put in these full sun beds. Now, in addition to where we want to put the extra beds, we're also reworking and reconsidering where we want to put our compost area and our compost tumbler. Because right now, it's right there. And it's not terribly far, but we'd like to really make sure we have a dedicated space for it as we move things around. And last but not least, we'll be adding a chicken tunnel in the garden this year, or what some people are calling a chunnel. This way our girls are going to have a way to go around the property, go around the backyard, forage without getting out of hand, without jumping into my garden beds and eating all of my produce, but also making sure that they keep their droppings to an approved area. The chicken tunnel is actually going to start where the coop and the chicken run meet at the base here along the back. It's going to come out from under. It's going to go along the fence line and around the entire backyard, so they have tons of space to forage. I have a ton of branches that I cut from this tree. That's actually going to go into our new garden beds as one of our base layers. I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but that's the plan for the chunnel, and I'm so excited. Now, I want to end this video with the same message with when I started. You can take steps to becoming more self-sufficient. You can grow in a small space. You can take what you have in a small backyard, suburban environment, and grow more of what you eat. You can even maybe get chickens or quail, depending on your area. All of this is possible. You don't need massive amounts of land. You don't need an entire orchard. You can do so much with a tiny space here. I know when I first understood how much I could do, I was completely empowered. And I hope to see what you're going to grow in your backyard. Thank you so much for watching.